My crazy best friend held a loaded firearm to my face, then called me dramatic for reacting, so I dropped him immediately. But now he's back, trying to convince everyone I'm the dangerous one. My mom died in a tragic car accident when I was 6 years old. My dad never loved me, and my best friend died of cancer when I was 10. But somehow, being in a mixed gender friend group as an 18-year-old is still the craziest thing I've ever gone through. At first, it was amazing. There were like 12 of us, and we all balanced each other out. None of the girls were pick-me's, and the guys didn't act like attorney pieces of shit. But then when we all went on a group holiday, everything fell apart. You see, one of our friends, Charles, decided to invite Hugo, because at the time, Hugo's only friends were people who he considered losers, so he wanted to level up. I already had a really bad impression of him, because he was the ex-boyfriend of my ex-best friend, and she told me multiple stories about how he had cheated on her. I also knew several girls who said he had effed them over. Nothing particularly awful. He just had a reputation of trying to kiss every girl he saw, then brag to his loser friends that he had been the one to reject them. Honestly, he was just extremely cringe, but Charles really wanted to invite him because they had been friends for years and he wanted to put him on. Well, we figured the more the merrier. Our first day in Paris is still one of my favorite memories. I got to see my all-time favorite paintings in the Louvre, and we all ate beautiful pasta with white wine by the glimmering Eiffel Tower. Literally the dream, like, ugh, I want to go back. Anyway, the next day was amazing too, but then came nighttime. We all wanted to go to this club that had a literal fish tank inside of it, and to save money, we all drank beforehand. Legal drinking age in France is 16. That's when I learned just how R-worded Charles really is. He insisted on taking one of our friends, Ella, on one of the rent scooters, and Ella agreed, which I thought was a little strange considering she had a boyfriend, but who am I to judge? So when me and the rest of the group got there, we headed inside. The only reason we got in was because there was just one boy and 2 girls. Good ratio. It was so beautiful, and me and my friend Daisy popped our French kitty cat like we ate down. After just 20 minutes, Hugo came running up to us. Ugh, guys, Ella fell off the scooter and she's over-exaggerating the pain, so they're not getting in. I rolled my eyes and we asked Hugo if we should go check on them. Nah, it's chill, let's just stay here, he said, so we simply took his word for it. The rest of the night was amazing until it was time to go home. I myself had so much fun, and I was so drunk that I couldn't stop talking about how fun it was. But when we saw Charles again, he was angry. Like, really angry. Except no one would tell us why. I remember sitting on my bed beside the balcony, listening to Charles and Hugo talk shit about me, saying how selfish I was. And Daisy must have heard me crying in the bathroom, because she came in and comforted me. She told me I wasn't selfish, and that I was the nicest girl she'd ever met. Little did I know, things were about to get extremely messy. The next day, Charles and Hugo were straight up ignoring me and Daisy. And Charles had a huge crush on Daisy, so she found out the information for me. Turns out, Ella had in fact fallen off her scooter, but it wasn't just a fall. It got so bad that the paramedics had to come and stitch her up. And of course, the entire time Hugo was telling Charles that me and Daisy were refusing to leave the club because we just wanted to kiss French guys. He even claimed that Daisy was trying to lead him on. Like what? I didn't even flirt with a single guy. And Hugo was rejected by so many girls that he ended up having to kiss a 30-year-old woman. For the next few days, there was a lot of tension between us. I sort of stopped caring after a while because I knew none of it was my fault. But as soon as the drama died down, Hugo stirred it back up again. Suddenly, Ella was telling me crazy things he'd say about me. And whenever I was near him, he went out of his way to treat me kindly. It was honestly disgusting. The only person who really took my side was Daisy, who also hated him by this point. Then came the final night of the trip. 5 of our friends had come for the last day, and were staying in an Airbnb nearby. When I heard this, I practically jumped for joy, because one of the boys was Jack, my all-time boy bestie who I adored. As soon as we heard they arrived, we, drunkenly, scooted towards them. Unfortunately, I forgot that Jack is an a-hole. He can best be described as one of those straight men who desperately want to be the gay best friend. So when I opened the door, he started shoving me away at full force. He even closed the door on my head. Looking back, it was definitely to impress the girls, and because he was practically in love with me. But why would abusing your friend impress them? Anyway, at the time I was too drunk to understand things clearly, so I cried on the side of the road. Jack even made one of our male friends, Pedro, cry too. But I guess I didn't realize how effed up Jack was, because out of nowhere he pulled out a gun from the Airbnb room. My heart stopped for a second, then started racing so fast I thought it might burst out of my chest. Chill, it's not loaded, Jack laughed, but his eyes had this weird intensity I'd never seen before. They were cold and calculating, like he was enjoying our fear. Pedro stepped between us, his voice shaking. Put that away, man. That's not funny. His hands were trembling, but he stood his ground, positioning himself as a shield between me and the GN. Jack waved it around like it was a toy, pointing it at each of us. You should see your faces right now. The barrel swung from Pedro to me and back again, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at the weapon that seemed impossibly large in Jack's hand. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might throw up. Even hammered, I knew this was beyond messed up. The hallway suddenly felt too small, too hot, too dangerous. That's when Marcus, Ella's boyfriend who'd come with Jack, grabbed the GN from him. What the hell is wrong with you? He hissed, checking the chamber. This is real, you psycho. His fingers moved expertly over the weapon, and I wondered briefly where he'd learned to handle GNs. Jack's face changed then, like he realized he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. It was just a joke, he muttered, but nobody was laughing. The silence in that hallway was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. We all backed away, stumbling into the street. I couldn't stop shaking. My teeth were chattering even though the night wasn't cold, and my legs felt like they might give out at any moment. Pedro put his arm around me while I sobbed, and I noticed tears streaming down his face too. His whole body was trembling against mine, and I realized he'd been just as terrified as I was. "Let's go back to our place," Daisy whispered, pulling us away from the Airbnb. Her voice was gentle but firm, a lifeline in the chaos of the moment. We walked through the dark streets in silence, the beauty of Paris now completely lost on us. We spent that last day in Paris trying to salvage what was left of our trip. The Eiffel Tower was just as magical the second time around, but there was a heaviness hanging over us. The sparkling lights seemed dimmer somehow, the magic of the city dulled by what had happened. Pedro kept checking his phone nervously, and Daisy seemed lost in thought. The pastries we bought from a little bakery tasted like ash in my mouth, and even the perfect espresso couldn't wake me from the fog I felt trapped in. "They're posting on Instagram," Pedro finally said, showing us his screen. There was Hugo, Charles, Jack, and Ella, posing with wine glasses at some fancy rooftop bar. Their smiles looked forced to me, but maybe that was just because I knew what was behind them. The caption read, "Real friends don't need drama to have fun, #ParisBound, #no negativity." The hashtags felt like a direct attack, a public declaration that we were the problem. I felt my stomach twist. They're really trying to make it seem like we're the problem. The sunlight reflecting off Pedro's phone screen hurt my eyes. Or maybe it was just the sight of Jack smiling like nothing had happened, like he hadn't pointed a gene at us hours earlier. "Let them," Daisy said firmly. "We know the truth." She squeezed my hand, her palm warm against mine, and I tried to draw strength from her certainty. But knowing the truth didn't make it hurt any less. These were people I'd trusted, people I'd been excited to travel with, and now they were actively trying to paint me as some kind of drama queen. The weight of their betrayal sat heavy on my chest, making it hard to breathe as we walked along the Seine, the water glittering in the afternoon sun. We returned to the apartment late that evening to find everyone already packing for our flight the next morning. The atmosphere was frigid. Charles and Hugo barely acknowledged our existence, moving around us like we were furniture rather than people they'd once called friends, while Jack made a point of loudly talking about how much better their day had been without certain people bringing everyone down. His voice carried across the apartment, each word designed to cut deep. I was folding my clothes when Ella approached me in our shared room. For a moment, I thought maybe she was going to apologize or at least explain herself. Her face was unreadable as she stood in the doorway, watching me pack my favorite sweater. "You know," she said quietly, "Hugo told me what you've been saying about me." She crossed her arms over her chest, her posture defensive. I froze. "What?" My hands stilled on the half-folded sweater, my mind racing to understand what she was talking about. That I'm desperate, that I throw myself at guys for attention. Her eyes were cold. He showed me the texts. She pulled out her phone as if ready to show me evidence. My jaw dropped. "What texts?" "I never said anything like that." My voice came out higher than I intended, squeaky with shock and confusion. She just gave me a look of disgust. "Save it. I thought we were friends." She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving me standing there in shock, the sweater still clutched in my hands. Before I could respond, she walked out, leaving me standing there in shock. I immediately grabbed my phone and texted Daisy. "Did you hear what Ella just accused me of?" My fingers trembled as I typed, making me hit backspace several times to correct mistakes. Daisy appeared in my doorway seconds later, her face grim. "Hugo's creating fake screenshots. He just tried to show me proof that you called me a pick-me behind my back." Her hair was still damp from the shower, and she looked exhausted. "That's insane." I felt sick. Why would he do this? My stomach churned with a mixture of anger and disbelief. How could someone go to such lengths to hurt people they barely knew? "Because we know too much," she said simply. "About him and Ella, about his lies." She sat down on the bed beside me, the mattress dipping under her weight. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Hugo methodically turning everyone against me, creating fake evidence, spinning narratives. The sounds of Paris at night filtered through the window, distant car horns, laughter from a nearby restaurant, the occasional siren, but they felt like they belonged to another world entirely. It was calculated and cruel in a way I couldn't comprehend. What kind of person puts this much effort into destroying someone? I stared at the ceiling, watching the headlights from passing cars create moving patterns of light and shadow, my mind unable to quiet down. The flight home the next day was excruciating. Our once unified group was now clearly split. Hugo, Charles, Ella, and Jack sat together, occasionally glancing back at me, Daisy, and Pedro with smug expressions. The rest of the group seemed confused by the division, but chose to stay out of it, creating a no-man's land of empty seats between the two factions. The drone of the airplane engines couldn't drown out the tension that filled the cabin. I thought, hoped, that once we were back home, things would cool down, that maybe distance would give everyone perspective. I was wrong. 3 days after we returned, the real bomb dropped. I woke up to my phone exploding with notifications. The constant buzzing pulled me from a deep sleep, and I squinted at the bright screen in my dark room. Jack had posted a lengthy Instagram caption about toxic friends, alongside a photo from our Paris trip. He didn't name names, but it was obvious who he was talking about. "Some people will show their true colors when they don't get the attention they crave," the post read. "Lying about serious situations, like someone pulling a real GN, just for sympathy is next-level crazy. Paris taught me who my real friends are." The words blurred as I read them, my brain refusing to process the blatant lies. The comments were flooded with people asking what happened, and Jack was happily filling them in, with a completely fabricated version of events. According to him, I had a meltdown because he gently asked me to leave them alone. Then I made up a story about him threatening me with a GN to get sympathy. My hands shook as I scrolled through comment after comment, each one worse than the last. I felt physically ill reading it. Worse, Hugo and Charles were actively commenting, backing up his story. Even Ella had liked the post. The betrayal cut deeper with each new notification, each new person who believed their lies without question. "This is insane," I whispered to myself, scrolling through the comments. People who weren't even on the trip were now weighing in, saying they always knew I was that type of girl. The morning sunlight streaming through my blinds felt too harsh, too exposing. As I sat there watching my reputation get torn apart in real time, my phone rang. It was Daisy. "Have you seen it?" she asked, her voice tight with anger. "Yeah," my voice cracked. "Daisy, they're making me sound delusional." I could hear the desperation in my own voice, the fear that people would actually believe their version of events. "I know. I already commented with what really happened, but Hugo deleted it. Then he DM'd me saying I should be careful about picking sides." She sounded tired, like she'd been up all night dealing with this. I sat up straight. "He threatened you?" My free hand clenched into a fist, nails digging into my palm. Not explicitly, but the implication was clear. She paused. "There's something else. Pedro just called me. Jack confronted him at the gym, accused him of being in love with you. It got pretty heated." I could hear the concern in her voice, picture her pacing her room as she talked. My heart sank. This is all my fault. The weight of guilt pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. "No," Daisy said firmly. "This is Hugo's fault, and Jack's, and everyone else who's playing along with their BS." Her certainty was like a lifeline, something solid to hold onto in the chaos. After we hung up, I sat on my bed, trying to figure out what to do. The sun had fully risen now, casting a golden glow across my dorm room that felt at odds with the darkness of the situation. Part of me wanted to post my own version of events, but I knew that would just feed into the drama queen narrative they were pushing. Another part wanted to reach out to Ella directly, to try to understand why she'd turned on me so completely. Before I could decide, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Marcus, Ella's boyfriend. Can we talk?" The message glowed on my screen, unexpected and concerning. My stomach dropped. I'd only met Marcus a few times, but he seemed like a nice guy. Did he know about Ella and Hugo? Should I tell him? I stared at the message for a long minute, weighing my options, before finally typing back, "Sure. When and where?" I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop near campus. When I arrived, he was already there, looking tired and upset. His normally neat hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "I know this is weird, but I didn't know who else to ask." He fidgeted with his coffee cup, turning it in circles on the table. "About what?" I wrapped my hands around my own cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. "Ella broke up with me yesterday. She said she needed space, but then I saw her Instagram story. She was with Hugo at some party." He looked at me with sad eyes. "Were they? Was something happening in Paris?" His voice cracked slightly on the question. I hesitated. The truth would hurt him, but he deserved to know. The coffee shop buzzed with activity around us. Students typing on laptops, baristas calling out orders, the hiss of the espresso machine, but it all felt distant compared to the intensity of this conversation. Pedro saw them kissing in the stairwell at the Airbnb, I admitted. "I'm sorry." I watched his face fall, saw the moment when suspicion hardened into certainty. Marcus nodded slowly, like he'd already suspected as much. "And Jack? Did he really pull a gun?" His eyes searched mine, looking for the truth. I tensed. Yes, it wasn't loaded according to him, but it was definitely real. "Marcus, you were there. You took it from him." My voice remained steady despite the memory of fear that flashed through me. His expression darkened. "I did, and I've known Jack since high school. He collects weapons. That GN was his pride and joy, and he knows exactly how terrifying it looks. That wasn't a joke. It was intimidation." He ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up even more. "But why?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Why would he want to scare me?" The question had been haunting me since that night. Marcus sighed. "Jack's been weird lately, competitive about everything. When I told him I was thinking of proposing to Ella after graduation, he got all strange about it." He looked down at his coffee, swirling it absently. That was news to me. "You were that serious?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. "I thought we were." He looked down at his coffee. "Guess not." The bitterness in his voice was palpable. We talked for almost an hour. The coffee shop slowly emptied around us as the morning rush ended, leaving us in a quiet corner with cold drinks and heavy revelations. Marcus filled me in on things I hadn't known, like how Jack had apparently had a thing for Ella for years, even before she and Marcus got together. How Jack had been the one to suggest inviting Hugo to Paris in the first place, claiming it would round out the group. "It's like he orchestrated this whole thing," Marcus said, realization dawning on his face. "Get Hugo there to tempt Ella, knowing Hugo's reputation with girls, then swoop in when it all falls apart." His fingers tapped a nervous rhythm on the table as the pieces fell into place. I felt a chill. Had Jack really been that calculating? It seemed far-fetched, but then again, so did pulling out a real GN as a joke. The sunlight coming through the coffee shop windows suddenly felt cold rather than warm. As we were leaving, Marcus stopped me. "About that GN thing, Jack knows exactly how terrifying it is. That wasn't a joke. It was him showing off power, and now he's trying to gaslight you about it because he knows how bad it makes him look." His eyes were serious, his jaw set with certainty. I walked home with my mind racing. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture they formed was uglier than I'd imagined. The campus looked the same as always. Students lounging on the grass, professors hurrying to classes, tour groups wandering through, but everything felt different now, tainted by what I'd learned. When I got back to my apartment, Daisy was waiting for me. Her expression told me something else had happened. She was sitting on my couch, her phone clutched in her hand, her face pale with anger. "Hugo's DMing me constantly," she said, showing me her phone. "At first he was trying to convince me you were lying about everything. Now he switched tactics." She handed me her phone, her fingers trembling slightly. I scrolled through the messages. Hugo had started by questioning my character, suggesting I had a history of creating drama for attention. When Daisy defended me, he pivoted to sympathy. "I'm just worried about her." One message read, "She seems unstable. Remember how she cried on the side of the road in Paris? That's not normal behavior." The words made my stomach turn, the casual way he twisted reality to suit his narrative. "She cried because Jack slammed a door on her head and then pulled out what looked like a real gene," Daisy had responded. "Anyone would be upset." Her defense of me brought tears to my eyes. That's her version. But think about it. Why would Jack do that? He's always been chill. Just stick to the story. She was hammered and dramatic. You were joking around. She's exaggerating for attention. The manipulation was so blatant it was almost laughable, if it wasn't so disturbing. I felt sick reading his attempts to manipulate Daisy. He's trying to gaslight you about something you literally witnessed. I handed the phone back, my hand shaking slightly with anger. I know. And the worst part is, he's doing this to everyone. She took her phone back. Pedro says Hugo reached out to him too, acting all concerned about his obvious feelings for you and how you're using him for support. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her movements agitated. That's ridiculous. I didn't even know Pedro had feelings for me until Paris. The idea was so absurd I almost laughed, despite everything. Daisy nodded. Hugo's trying to isolate you, turn everyone against you, or make them doubt themselves for believing you. The afternoon sun streaming through my apartment windows cast harsh shadows across her worried face. The realization hit me like a truck. This isn't just about Paris anymore, is it? This is about Hugo wanting to destroy me for some reason. The thought made me cold all over, despite the warmth of my apartment. I think so. And Jack's using it to his advantage to cover up his own behavior. She reached for my hand, squeezing it reassuringly. We spent the rest of the evening documenting everything. Screenshots of Hugo's messages to Daisy, Jack's Instagram post and comments, everything we could think of that showed their pattern of lies and manipulation. The soft clicking of our keyboards and the occasional sigh were the only sounds in my apartment as we worked. It wasn't much of a defense, but it made me feel less crazy to see it all laid out. The next day, things escalated even further. Hugo posted a long, seemingly heartfelt Instagram caption about toxic friendships and learning who really has your back. He didn't name me directly, but he included a photo from Paris where I was visibly cropped out. The early morning light made my phone screen hard to read as I squinted at the post, my stomach dropping with each word. The comments were flooded with support for him, including one from Ella that made my blood boil. So glad we all see her true colors now. Some people will do anything for attention, even make up stories about GNs and violence. Each word felt like a physical blow, the betrayal cutting deeper with every comment. I was about to close the app when I noticed a new comment from Pedro. Funny how you're talking about toxic friends when you're the one who hooked up with Ella behind Marcus's back. I saw you in the stairwell, both of you. The bold text stood out among the sea of supportive comments. A truth bomb dropped into Hugo's carefully constructed narrative. My heart stopped. Oh no. Within minutes, the comment section exploded. Hugo denied it, of course. Ella llamó a Pedro mentiroso. Jack jumped in to defend both of them, calling Pedro obsessed with me and willing to say anything to back up my delusions. The notifications kept coming, each one more vicious than the last. But then something unexpected happened. One of the quieter girls from our trip, Sophie, commented. I saw them too, in the hallway outside our room. Didn't say anything because it wasn't my business, but I'm not going to sit here and watch Pedro get called a liar. Her simple statement cut through the noise, a quiet voice of truth amid the chaos. The tide started to turn. Other people from the trip began commenting, sharing their own observations. How Hugo and Ella had been suspiciously close the whole time. How Jack had indeed been aggressive that night, not just with me, but with Pedro too. The comment section became a battlefield, with truth slowly gaining ground against the lies. Hugo's response was swift and vicious. He posted a story claiming that Pedro and I had hooked up in Paris, complete with a photo of us walking together that he'd clearly taken from a distance. Guess we know why they're backing each other up now. Krar caught Trawer player and pick me. The grainy image showed Pedro with his arm around me as I cried on the street after the GN incident, twisted to look like something romantic rather than a friend comforting another friend. Pedro called me immediately, panicking. We didn't. His voice was high with stress, words tumbling over each other. I know, I assured him. Everyone who matters knows too. I tried to sound confident, even as my own anxiety spiraled, but the damage was spreading. People who weren't even involved were now messaging me, asking if I'd really hooked up with Pedro while leading Jack on. The narrative had somehow morphed into me being jealous because Jack had rejected me, so I turned to Pedro for comfort, and was now making up stories about Jack to get back at him. My phone buzzed constantly with messages, each one more absurd than the last. It was exhausting and infuriating. I couldn't believe how quickly a simple vacation had devolved into this toxic mess of lies and manipulation. I sat on my bed, staring out the window at the campus below, students going about their normal lives while mine felt like it was imploding. That evening, I got a text from Ella. We need to talk. Alone. The message glowed ominously on my screen, filling me with dread. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a quiet corner of the campus library. The smell of old books and the soft rustle of pages turning created a deceptive sense of normalcy as I waited. When I arrived, she was already there, looking nervous. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she kept glancing around as if afraid someone would see us together. I need you to back off, she said. Stop having Pedro spread lies about me and Hugo. Her voice was hard, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. I stared at her in disbelief. They're not lies. Multiple people saw you together. I kept my voice low, conscious of the students studying nearby. It was one kiss, one mistake. Her voice was hard. And now you're trying to ruin my reputation. She picked at her nail polish, flakes of red falling onto the library table. I haven't said anything publicly, I pointed out. Pedro did. And only after Jack and Hugo started dragging my name through the mud. The frustration I'd been holding back threatened to spill over. Because you're being dramatic about everything. Jack was just joking around with that gun. You're the one who freaked out and made it a whole thing. She waved her hand dismissively, as if pointing a GN at someone was no big deal. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Ella, he closed a door on my head. Then he pulled out what looked like a real gun. That's not a joke. It's intimidation. I could feel my heart rate increasing as I relived the moment. Oh, please. She rolled her eyes. You've always been so sensitive. And now you're trying to turn everyone against Hugo because, what? You're jealous that he likes me instead of you? The accusation was so ridiculous that it momentarily stunned me. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. I have zero interest in Hugo. He's been lying about me this entire time, and for some reason you're backing him up. I leaned forward, trying to understand what had happened to the girl I thought was my friend. Her expression flickered, just for a moment. Hugo cares about me. He's been there for me. For a second, she sounded uncertain, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. The same Hugo who lied about how serious your scooter accident was, who left you injured so he could go to the club. I kept my voice gentle, not wanting to attack her, but needing her to see the truth. He explained that. He didn't want everyone making a big deal and ruining the trip. She fidgeted with her bracelet, twisting it around her wrist over and over. I shook my head. Ella, listen to yourself. He left you injured and lied to us about it. And now he's hooking up with you while you're still technically with Marcus. Does that sound like someone who cares about you? The library light seemed too bright suddenly, highlighting every emotion that crossed her face. Her eyes welled with tears. You don't understand. Hugo gets me in a way Marcus never did. A single tear escaped, tracking down her cheek. And Jack? Where does he fit into all this? I asked, genuinely curious about the dynamics I was only now beginning to understand. She looked away. Jack's just a friend. But there was something in her voice, a hesitation that made me doubt her words. A friend who's been in love with you for years, according to Marcus. A friend who invited Hugo to Paris, knowing Hugo's reputation with girls. I watched her face carefully, saw the moment when confusion gave way to realization. Ella's head snapped up. What are you talking about? Her Her eyes widened with genuine surprise. I told her what Marcus had shared with me, about Jack's long-standing feelings for her, his reaction to Marcus wanting to propose, his suggestion to invite Hugo. With each revelation, her face grew paler, her fingers gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. That's not. Jack wouldn't. She trailed off, looking confused. The certainty she'd walked in with was crumbling before my eyes. Think about it, Ella. Who benefits most from you and Marcus breaking up? From you hooking up with someone with a reputation for using girls and moving on? I kept my voice gentle, not wanting to attack her, but needing her to see the truth. She stood up abruptly. I need to go. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor, earning us glares from nearby students. As she walked away, I called after her. Just ask yourself why Hugo and Jack are so determined to discredit me and Pedro. What are they afraid will expose? My words echoed slightly in the quiet library, following her as she hurried away. I didn't hear from Ella again that day, but the next morning, everything changed. I woke up to a series of screenshots from Daisy, private messages between Hugo and Jack that someone had leaked to the group chat. The morning sunlight streaming through my blinds seemed too cheerful for the bombshell that had just landed in my lap. Dude, we need to get our story straight about that night, Jack had written. If people believe her about the GN thing, I'm screwed. The timestamp showed it was sent just hours after the incident. Relax, Hugo replied. No one's going to believe her over us. Just stick to the story. She was hammered and dramatic. You were joking around. She's exaggerating for attention. His casual dismissal of the truth made my skin crawl. What about Pedro? He saw everything. Jack's concern was palpable even through text. I'm handling Pedro, making sure everyone knows he's just backing her up because he wants to get with her. Same with Daisy. She's just being a loyal friend. We've got Charles and Ella on our side. That's all that matters. The calculated manipulation laid out so plainly was chilling. There was more. Messages about how Jack had finally gotten Ella to break up with Marcus, how Hugo was just having fun with Ella but had no intention of anything serious, how they needed to contain the damage from Pedro's comment about catching them together. The messages went on and on, each one more damning than the last. I felt a strange mix of vindication and disgust. Here was proof that they'd been deliberately lying, manipulating the narrative, gaslighting me and anyone who supported me. But seeing it laid out so coldly, so calculatingly, made me feel sick. My hands shook as I scrolled through message after message, each one revealing a new layer of their deception. Who leaked these? I asked Daisy when she called. The morning was still early. Campus quiet, except for a few dedicated joggers visible from my window. That's the best part, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. It was Ella. Her satisfaction was evident even through the phone. Apparently, after our conversation, Ella had confronted Jack about what I told her. His reaction, defensive, angry, dismissive, had raised red flags. So she'd asked to see his phone, claiming she wanted to show him something. When he refused, she'd gotten suspicious, and somehow managed to access his messages while he was in the shower at her place. The bathroom fan had covered the sound of her frantically taking screenshots, her hand shaking as she uncovered more and more evidence of their deception. What she found confirmed everything I'd said, and worse. Jack and Hugo had been plotting together from the beginning. Jack had invited Hugo to Paris specifically to tempt Ella, knowing Hugo's reputation. He'd been counting on Hugo to hook up with Ella and then discard her, leaving Jack to comfort her and finally have his chance. The plan was so calculated, so manipulative, that it made my skin crawl just thinking about it. She's devastated, Daisy said, and furious. She forwarded everything to the group chat and then blocked both of them. I could hear the vindication in Daisy's voice, the relief that finally the truth was out. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Charles, who had been backing Hugo and Jack, went silent when confronted with the evidence. The rest of the group was horrified by the calculated manipulation. Jack's Instagram post about me was flooded with new comments calling him out for lying. The tide had turned completely, washing away their carefully constructed narrative in an instant. Hugo tried to claim the messages were fake, that Ella was making them up because he'd rejected her, but it was too late. The screenshots showed his distinct typing style, references to conversations only he and Jack would know about, timestamps that aligned with events from the trip. No one was buying his desperate denials. Jack took a different approach. He posted a long, rambling apology on his Instagram, claiming he'd gotten caught up in the moment, and let his feelings for Ella cloud his judgment. He admitted the GN was real, but insisted it wasn't loaded and he'd just been trying to lighten the mood. He even tried to throw Hugo under the bus, saying Hugo had been the one pushing him to discredit me. His attempt to save face was transparent and pathetic. Nobody was buying it. By that evening, the tide had completely turned. People were messaging me with apologies for believing Jack and Hugo. Charles sent a lengthy text admitting he'd been wrong to take their side without hearing mine. Even some of Jack's other friends reached out, saying they'd always known he had issues but never thought he'd go this far. The campus that had felt hostile just days before now seemed to be rallying around me, offering support I hadn't expected. The only person I hadn't heard from was Ella, until my phone rang around midnight. The soft glow of my bedside lamp was the only light in my room as I answered, unsure what to expect. I'm so sorry, she said immediately, her voice thick with tears. I should have believed you from the start. The raw emotion in her voice was unmistakable. It's okay, I said, though part of me wasn't sure if it was. You got manipulated too. I sat up in bed, pulling my knees to my chest as I listened. No, it's not okay. I said awful things about you. I let Hugo convince me you were lying, when deep down I knew you wouldn't make something like that up. She took a shaky breath. And I cheated on Marcus, with someone who was just using me as part of some twisted game with Jack. Her voice broke on the last words. I didn't know what to say to that. She had cheated, and Hugo had used her. Those were facts. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of her quiet sniffles. I broke up with Marcus because I genuinely thought I had feelings for Hugo, she continued. But now I see it was all just, I don't know, the excitement of Paris, the attention Hugo was giving me. I fell for his whole act. The regret in her voice was palpable. Have you talked to Marcus? I asked. I traced patterns on my comforter, following the stitching with my finger as I waited for her answer. Yeah, he doesn't want anything to do with me, which I understand. Her voice cracked. I ruined everything. My relationship, our friend group, your reputation. The pain in her voice was real, but so was the damage she'd done. The friend group was already toxic, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Maybe this needed to happen. And maybe it did. Maybe we all needed to see the truth about each other before we could move forward, either together or apart. After we hung up, I sat on my bed, processing everything. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of drama, betrayal, and pain, but sitting there in my quiet dorm room, I realized something important. I was okay. More than okay, actually. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I knew who I was and what I deserved. Not because of some dramatic showdown or public vindication, but because I'd weathered the storm without losing myself in it. The next day, I met Pedro at our campus coffee shop. The place was buzzing with students, and I spotted him in the corner booth, nervously fidgeting with a sugar packet. The familiar smells of coffee and pastries filled the air, creating a sense of normalcy that had been missing for weeks. When he saw me, his face lit up with a tentative smile. Hey, he said as I slid into the seat across from him. I already ordered your usual. He pushed a steaming mug toward me, the perfect amount of cream swirling on top. Thanks. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, grateful for the small gesture of normalcy after everything that had happened. The ceramic was smooth against my palms, grounding me in the present moment. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before both starting to speak at the same time. You go first, I said, laughing a little. The tension broke, and suddenly it was just Pedro and me again, friends sharing coffee like we had countless times before. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. Not just the Paris disaster, but also for not realizing sooner what was happening. I traced the rim of my mug with my finger, avoiding his eyes. You don't need to apologize, Pedro said firmly. You stood up for the truth. That's more than most people did. His sincerity was written all over his face, in the earnest way he leaned forward, in the warmth of his eyes. As we talked, I felt some of the tension from the past few weeks beginning to ease. Pedro was just Pedro. Honest, kind, a bit awkward, but real. There was something comforting about that after all the manipulation and lies. The coffee shop chatter around us faded into the background as we reconnected, finding our way back to the friendship that had been tested but not broken. My phone buzzed with a notification. Another message from Ella. Can we meet up today? Need to talk more. The screen glowed brightly between us, interrupting our conversation. I showed Pedro the text. What do you think? Should I meet her? I valued his opinion, especially after everything we'd been through together. He considered it for a moment. I think you should do whatever feels right for you. But remember, you don't owe her your time or emotional energy just because she finally realized the truth. His words were measured, thoughtful. I nodded, appreciating his perspective. I'll think about it. And I would. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive Ella, but I also wasn't sure if holding on to anger would help anyone, least of all me. We finished our coffee and walked back across campus together. The sun was shining, students were lounging on the grass, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe normally again. The campus paths were lined with blooming flowers, their bright colors a stark contrast to the darkness that had surrounded us for so long. Want to hang out this weekend? Pedro asked as we reached the point where our paths diverged. Daisy mentioned a movie night at her place. Nothing fancy, just a few people. His casual invitation felt like a step back toward normalcy. That sounds perfect, I said, meaning it. A quiet night with trusted friends was exactly what I needed. As Pedro walked away, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a group message from Charles to everyone who'd been on the Paris trip, meeting at my place tonight at 8. Important stuff to discuss. Please come. The message was brief, but loaded with potential complications. I frowned, wondering what this was about. After everything that had happened, did I really want to subject myself to another group gathering? The thought of facing everyone again made my stomach twist with anxiety. But curiosity got the better of me, and I texted Daisy. You going to Charles's thing tonight? I needed to know if I'd have allies there before committing. Yeah, she replied. Sophie says he wants to apologize to everyone, especially you. Might be worth hearing him out. Her reassurance helped ease some of my concerns. I wasn't convinced, but I agreed to go if Daisy would be there too. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes and homework, a welcome distraction from the drama that had consumed my life for weeks. When I arrived at Charles's apartment that evening, I was surprised to see almost everyone from the Paris trip there, minus Jack and Hugo, thankfully. The apartment was warm and slightly crowded, the air thick with tension and expectation. Ella sat in a corner, looking miserable. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her posture defensive as she huddled in an oversized sweater. Pedro and Daisy immediately came to stand beside me, a silent show of support that meant more than they knew. Their presence gave me strength, a reminder that I wasn't alone. Charles cleared his throat nervously. Thanks for coming, everyone. I wanted to get us all together because I owe a lot of you an apology. He looked directly at me. Especially you. I believed Hugo and Jack's lies without question, and I helped spread them. That was wrong, and I'm truly sorry. His voice was steady, but his hands fidgeted at his sides, betraying his nervousness. I nodded, acknowledging his words, but not quite ready to forgive completely. The apology was a start, but it couldn't erase the hurt his actions had caused. I also wanted to let you all know that I've cut ties with both of them, Charles continued. What they did, manipulating everyone, gaslighting, that GN incident, it's unforgivable. His face was serious, his usual joking manner completely absent. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. I noticed Ella wiping away tears. The soft lamplight caught the moisture on her cheeks, making them glisten. So what now? Someone asked. Is our friend group just over? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Charles looked around the room. That's up to all of you. But I think we need to acknowledge that what happened in Paris revealed some serious issues that were probably always there. Maybe we need to rebuild on a healthier foundation. His words were thoughtful, more mature than I'd expected from him. The conversation continued, with people sharing their perspectives on what had happened. Some admitted they'd seen red flags with Jack or Hugo before but had ignored them. Others expressed regret for not speaking up sooner. The room felt both tense and cathartic, like we were lancing a wound that had been festering for too long. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath. I appreciate everyone who's apologized and acknowledged what happened, but I think I need some time and space to process everything before I can move forward with this group. My voice was steady despite the nerves fluttering in my stomach. There were nods of understanding. No one tried to pressure me or make me feel guilty, which was refreshing after weeks of manipulation. The respect for my boundaries felt like a small victory. As the gathering wound down, Ella approached me hesitantly. Can we talk? Just for a minute? Her voice was small, uncertain. I glanced at Daisy, who gave me an encouraging nod. Sure, I said, following Ella to Charles's balcony. The cool night air was a relief after the stuffy apartment. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin. Ella leaned against the railing, looking out at the city lights. The distant sounds of traffic and music created a backdrop to our conversation, a reminder of the world continuing beyond our drama. I broke up with Hugo, she said. Not that we were officially together or anything, but I told him I never wanted to speak to him again. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to hold herself together. Good for you, I said, meaning it. Despite everything, I didn't want to see her hurt anymore. He tried to convince me the messages were fake. Can you believe that? Even with the evidence right there. She shook her head. I was so stupid. Her voice cracked on the last word. You weren't stupid, I said. You were manipulated by someone who's really good at it. The city lights blurred slightly as I remembered how convincing Hugo could be, how easily he twisted reality. Ella turned to face me, her eyes shining with tears. Why are you being nice to me? After everything I said about you? Her confusion was genuine, her remorse palpable. I considered the question. Because I know what it's like to be manipulated and gaslit, and because holding on to anger is exhausting. The truth of my own words surprised me. When had I decided that forgiveness was an option? I don't deserve your forgiveness, she whispered. The breeze caught her hair, blowing strands across her face. Maybe not yet, I admitted, but I'm willing to give you the chance to earn it. And I was. Not for her sake, but for mine. because carrying resentment was a weight I no longer wanted to bear. We rejoined the others inside, where the conversation had shifted to lighter topics. It felt strange, almost surreal, to be laughing with these people after everything that had happened, but also healing, somehow, like the first warm day after a long winter. As I was leaving, Pedro caught up with me in the hallway. You okay? His concern was evident in the furrow of his brow, the careful way he studied my face. Yeah, I said, surprised to realize it was true. I think I am. And for the first time in weeks, I believed it. The next few days passed in a blur of classes and study sessions. I deliberately stayed off social media, needing a break from the drama. The campus routine was comforting. Morning coffee at the same cafe, familiar faces in lectures, the rhythm of academic life that continued regardless of personal chaos. Daisy kept me updated on the essential stuff, like how Jack had apparently transferred to a different university after several people came forward with stories about his aggressive behavior, or how Hugo had tried to damage control by posting a tearful apology video that no one was buying. On Friday night, I went to Daisy's movie night as planned. It was small, just Daisy, Pedro, Sophie, and a couple of other friends who hadn't been part of the Paris trip. We watched bad horror movies, ate too much pizza, and laughed until my sides hurt. The simple pleasure of being with people who genuinely cared about me was something I'd taken for granted before Paris. But now I treasured it. It felt normal in a way nothing had in weeks. As Pedro was walking me back to my dorm afterward, he brought up something unexpected. Marcus called me yesterday, he said. He wanted to know if you were okay. The streetlights cast long shadows as we walked, the campus quiet at this late hour. I raised my eyebrows. Really? That's nice of him. I was genuinely surprised that Marcus would check on me after everything that had happened. Yeah. He also mentioned that Jack's been telling people you're the reason he had to leave school, that you falsely accused him of threatening you with a real GN. Pedro's voice was tight with anger as he relayed this information. I stopped walking. Are you kidding me? The peace had been feeling shattered, replaced by a familiar anxiety. Pedro shook his head. Marcus shut him down immediately. Said he'd seen the messages between Jack and Hugo and knew the truth. But I thought you should know Jack's still trying to spin this. He stuffed his hands in his pockets, looking troubled. I sighed, feeling the weight of it all settling back on my shoulders. Will this ever end? The question came out more vulnerable than I intended. It will, Pedro assured me. People already know the truth. Jack's just desperate now. His confidence was reassuring, a reminder that I wasn't facing this alone. When I got back to my room, I found myself staring at my phone, tempted to check Jack's social media and see what he was saying about me. The screen glowed in my dark room, a portal to potential pain. But I resisted. His opinion of me didn't matter anymore. Instead, I texted Marcus. Pedro told me you defended me to Jack. Thank you. It felt important to acknowledge his support, even if we weren't close. His response came quickly. No need to thank me. Jack's shown his true colors to everyone now. The simple message was oddly comforting. We chatted for a while, and I found myself enjoying the conversation. Marcus was thoughtful and funny in a quiet way I hadn't noticed before. When he suggested getting coffee sometime, I surprised myself by agreeing. After everything that had happened, the idea of making new connections rather than dwelling on broken ones felt right. The weekend passed peacefully, but Monday brought new drama. I walked into my first class to find people staring and whispering. The familiar classroom suddenly felt hostile, the whispers following me like shadows. Daisy rushed over to me, her face flushed with anger. Have you seen what Ella posted? She asked, pulling out her phone. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. My stomach dropped. No, what now? I braced myself for whatever new betrayal was coming. Daisy showed me Ella's Instagram. There was a long post about toxic relationships and learning from mistakes. But what caught my attention was the photo. Ella and Hugo, looking cozy at what appeared to be a party from the previous night. They were smiling at the camera, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. It was like the past few weeks had never happened. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered. After everything, the betrayal felt fresh all over again. A wound reopened just as it was beginning to heal. Keep reading, Daisy said grimly. Her finger hovered over the screen, pointing to the caption. I scrolled down to the caption. Sometimes the people you think are toxic are just misunderstood. And Hugo and I have worked through our issues and are stronger than ever. To those who tried to come between us with lies and manipulation, karma will find you. Each word felt like a slap, the complete reversal of everything Ella had said to me on Charles's balcony. She's back with him? I couldn't believe it. After the screenshots, after he admitted to using her, the classroom around us faded away as I tried to process this new development. Daisy nodded. And she's implying you were the manipulative one. Her disgust was evident in the curl of her lip, the hardness in her eyes. I handed the phone back, suddenly tired. You know what? I don't care anymore. They deserve each other. And surprisingly, I meant it. The Ella drama, the Hugo manipulation, the Jack lies, it all felt distant somehow, like it had happened to someone else. The bright morning sunlight streaming through the classroom windows seemed to illuminate a new path forward, one that didn't include toxic people or endless drama. That afternoon, I met Marcus for coffee as planned. We talked about everything except Paris. Classes, favorite movies, childhood memories. It was refreshing to have a conversation that wasn't weighed down by drama. The coffee shop buzzed with normal activity around us, a reminder that life goes on despite personal upheavals. You seem different, Marcus observed as we were leaving. More, I don't know, centered maybe? He held the door open for me as we stepped out into the afternoon sunshine. I considered this. I think I am. The whole Paris disaster was awful, but it taught me a lot about who I can trust and who I can't, about standing my ground even when people try to make me doubt myself. The realization felt important. A lesson hard won, but valuable. Marcus nodded. For what it's worth, I admire how you handled everything. You didn't sink to their level, even when it would have been easy to. His sincerity was evident in his eyes, the gentle way he spoke. His words stayed with me as I walked to my next class. Had I really handled it well? There were moments I'd wanted to lash out, to post my own version of events, to make sure everyone knew exactly what Jack and Hugo had done, but something had held me back. Not fear, but a sense that adding more fuel to the fire wouldn't help anyone, least of all me. The campus paths were filled with students rushing to class, all with their own dramas and challenges, reminding me that my story was just one of many. 2 weeks later, the Paris drama had mostly faded from campus gossip. Ella and Hugo were still together, posting sickeningly sweet couple photos, as if the whole manipulation scandal had never happened. Jack had apparently transferred again after his reputation followed him to his new school. Charles had settled into a quieter role in our reformed friend group, still clearly carrying guilt about his part in everything. The seasons were beginning to change, leaves turning golden and red, a visual reminder that nothing stays the same forever. And me? I was doing better than I'd expected. The movie nights with Daisy, Pedro, and our small circle had become a regular thing. I'd gone on a few casual dates with Marcus, enjoying his company without rushing into anything serious. I'd even started painting again, something I'd loved as a kid but had abandoned somewhere along the way. The feel of the brush in my hand, the smell of paint, the way colors blended on canvas, it all brought me a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. My mom died when I was 6. My dad never loved me. My childhood best friend died of cancer when I was 10. And yes, a mixed-gender friend group at 18 had somehow still managed to be the craziest thing I'd ever experienced. But I'd survived it all, and somehow I knew I'd be just fine.